Hi, and welcome to the Rice Museum of Rocks and Minerals. I'm your host, Garrett Romaine. Today I'm going to walk you through the Meteorite Gallery. This is really great for anybody who's interested in rocks from space. Meteorites are the remnants of a planetoid that was between Mars and Jupiter. It's called the asteroid belt. It's probably the remains of a planet that either broke up because it was unwieldy or maybe got bashed into, who knows, but you've got the material from that collision and from that debris that is falling to Earth. And then you've got other stuff that comes in once in a while. You might have something hit the surface of the moon and blast that basalt into the Earth's orbit, and then it falls to Earth. So not just from the meteorite belt, asteroid belt. So one of the cool things about meteorites is they come into Earth, and unlike how gold and heavies settle out at the beginning of a bend in the river, the heavier objects in a clunk of meteorites, the heaviest ones go the farthest. So you've got these strewn fields over several miles, kind of in an ellipsoid, and the lighter stuff falls out first. There's more centrifugal energy, I think is what it is, and more inertia. So this part of the display rolls you through strewn fields, talks about the difference between meteors and fireballs. Meteors are a streak of light, fireballs are extremely bright. And one thing that's kind of neat is that we're finding more and more of these meteorites that have fallen to Earth because of so many closed-circuit cameras and other camera devices and weather installations. They are able to triangulate the path of a meteorite, and so we're finding more falls. We talk a little bit about the surface features of meteorites, the crust that's on them, and then iron meteorites in particular have this kind of a regmaglyph, a little thumbprint shape on the exterior of the meteorite. We'll roll you through where they come from, talk a little bit about asteroids, and show you some of the main textural features. There are three different classifications. There's iron meteorites, stony iron, and stony. And by far the bulk are stony irons and stonies. The iron meteorites are only about 8%, but they're the coolest, right? They're heavy. They kind of capture our imagination a little bit more than the stony ones do. They're easier to find with a magnet. The iron meteorites have a little bit of nickel in them, so they're just a much more interesting rock. So once you get down to the stony irons and the stonies, which are the bulk of meteors, now you have two different classifications. You've got chondrites and you've got achondrites. So chondrites are from chondrules, little bubbles in there, little tiny blebs, if you will. And a real famous one is the Murchison meteorite. I did another video on the Murchison, and unlike most of the meteors from the asteroid belt, they're about 4.5 billion years old, which is roughly the age of the Earth. The Murchison seems to date more like 7 billion years old. And it also was carrying amino acids, so that may have been one way life formed, by sprinkling amino acid-rich rocks into the primordial ocean. So you've got a map up here that talks about some of the main locations where meteorites have been found, and there's about 20 of them there. Then there's some really cool textural and features of these iron meteorites in particular. You can see down here one's been polished. If you slice an iron meteorite, polish it to a high level, and then etch it with a strong acid, you get what's called a Widmanstätten pattern. And there's a great example here. These are individual grains of minerals that cooled at an extremely slow rate. And they're hexadrite, ataxite, camosite, taenite, some pretty weird minerals. They're mostly irons, and you can see they're interlocking crystals in that etched display. So we have some really good examples of some famous meteorites from North America, and the Campo de Cielo is one of my favorites. It is constantly spalling off little chunks of iron oxide. It really reacts quickly with the Earth's atmosphere. And you've got some Meteor Crater, Canyon Diablo. There's also something called tektites, which are formed when a meteorite blasts into the Earth's surface, ejects out a whole bunch of material it's kind of in a molten glassy form, and then it cools real quickly. And sometimes you'll get rounded tektites that have those little regmaglyphs in them, little tiny thumbprints, and sometimes you'll get this layered meteorite, layered tektite, excuse me, mostly from Indochina. It's almost like obsidian. It's really cool. And down here we have impact breccias and impactites. This is when a large chunk slams into the Earth's surface and it ejects out this material. It's all fractured and broken up, and then it cools slowly, or cools quickly, and it forms this breccia. And there are some pretty well-known impact sites in the world. One of the famous ones is the Rees crater at Nordlingen. Here's an example of that one. This is from Rochechouart in France, and then you've got one from Wisconsin at Glover's Bluff. And I want to call your attention to Dick Pugh, the meteorite expert that's pictured with this giant meteorite, the Hoba. Dick Pugh recently passed away. He was a great friend of the museum. He used to come out for Mystery Mineral Day and spend all his time sorting through meteor wrongs, and very rarely found a meteorite, but he had lots of patience for what people would bring in to show him. And then these meteor craters, I've got to talk about the Chicxulub crater in the Yucatan. It's about 65 million years old, and it is right exactly on the boundary between the Cretaceous, which was the last time for the age of dinosaurs, and the Tertiary. And there is a ring around the world of all sedimentary rocks that have a whitish layer of iridium-rich sediment, and that had to be from the ejection when this crater was formed. And that seems to have been what ended the reign of dinosaurs, as the ash cloud must have blotted out the sun, changed the world's temperatures. So Chicxulub is a very famous one. So let me end down here with our Oregon meteorites. This is the famed Willamette meteorite in 1905. You can see it looks like a cone. You've got the heat shield on the bottom, and then as things melt off of that, it formed a cone behind it. It must have been pretty amazing as it came in. There's no known crater for the Willamette meteorite. It probably came to Lake Oswego on an ice raft during one of the Missoula flood events. We've got a couple of fragments of that. Got an iron meteorite from Klamath Falls. Sam's Valley is another iron meteorite. Fitzwater Pass is a rare 3F iron meteorite. And then there's a couple of little tiny fragments. A couple of deputy sheriffs were sitting in their patrol car and they heard a woof, woof, woof. As these things floated in, they hit the shingles on a roof right next to them, and so it was a really great example of a find. The best one, though, is this Morrow County meteorite. A couple of rock hounds like to bring a rock home from everywhere they went, and this one was sitting next to a wheat field out by Heppner. They picked it up, brought it home, put it under their barbecue for 8 years, saw a TV show about meteorites, thought, well, we should get this checked out because it's got really characteristic molten patterns on it. This would have been the heat shield down here, and then it would have formed back here. This has been sliced off for ID, and a plow probably knocked the tip of it off. Anyway, long story short, they brought it to a rock show at Castle Rock, and Dick Pugh and others eventually got involved, and it was analyzed, and it was found to be a really nice example, and it is now on display at the Rice Museum. So there's more out there. Dick Pugh used to always tell me, go out to Eastern Oregon with those old dried up lake beds. When they were covered with ice, they would form a crust, and anything that fell on them would stick in the ice. Then when it broke up in the spring, the prevailing winds would brush everything to the east side of that lake, and then as the ice would melt, it should drop out. Go out there with a magnet or a metal detector, and you might find Oregon's 7th meteorite. So that's it for me. I hope you can come out here when we're opened up again and enjoy this museum exhibit and the rest of them. Thanks.